Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and I'm here today at the Central Ballistics Lab of the French National Gendarmerie, the IRCGN, taking a look at some of the interesting guns in their reference collection, like this, which appears to be a Tavor TAR-21. It is actually a Ukrainian Fort 221. I don't know a lot about these. Information is very difficult to come by for probably obvious reasons, but there's not much. There aren't a lot of resources out there showing these guns up close, so I figured we'll at least take a close look. I will tell you what I can about it, and then speculate as to what I don't know, and perhaps we can find some more answers from people who have more detailed knowledge. So, to begin with, this is manufactured by a company called RPC Fort. Fort stands for the State Research and Production Association. It is a manufacturing conglomerate. It's the primary arms, small arms at least, manufacturing conglomerate in Ukraine, located in the west of Ukraine. It was formed as a company in 1991 when Ukraine got their independence from the crumbling Soviet Union. In 1998, it became a state-run enterprise, and it continues to be a state-run enterprise today. And by the way, a big thanks to the Armorer's Bench. Matt Moss has probably the most informative video out there about the Ukrainian production Tavors in service in the war, so if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check out that video on the Armorer's Bench. Anyway, in 2008, Fort got and this was all pretty widely publicized, they got a license contract to manufacture IWI small arms. And it was a huge variety of them, not just Tavors. And by the way, it was both the TAR-21 and the Tavor X95, the shorter version, as well as other Israeli designs like the Galil Ace, the Galatz, which is the 308 original old school Galil, the Negev light machine gun, and others. It's unclear to me exactly how many of these designs actually went into production, but we know the Tavors actually did. Now, these were listed on Fort's website. They were available. I don't know how much of the intention was to make the guns for the Ukrainian military and how much was to make them for export sales, because they were purchased by the Ukrainian military starting in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. But in relatively small numbers, they were purchased by some special operations units and also by some Ministry of the Interior security forces. It wasn't like a huge wide-scale adoption. Obviously, there aren't tons of these things floating around Ukraine, but you do see them these days. On the other hand, with its current invasion, Ukraine is willing to use presumably any really effective modern small arm that it can get its hands on, especially ones in 5.56 that are going to be ammunition compatible with the other guns they're using. So 2014 to 2016, we start seeing the guns in Ukrainian service. Don't know exactly how many were made, what the original purpose was. So let's take a closer look at this. It is an exact clone of the TAR-21, so there's not a whole lot for me to show you, but we'll at least take a look at the markings and some of the features. So here's the whole thing. By the way, the Magpul is a random magazine that I put in this. I don't know exactly what magazines Fort was manufacturing or supplying with the rifles, so don't consider this as canon or current use. The only actual evidence we have here that this is a Ukrainian rifle are the markings here. That's Fort 221 in 5.56 millimeter, serial number of course, and the Fort production logo. Now 221 is the designation for the TAR-21. There is discussion of these being manufactured in 5.45 as well, and I know the Tavor was made in 5.45. Was it purchased by Ukraine? Was it licensed by Ukraine in 5.45? I think so, but I can't speak to it for sure. The other commonly recognized variation here is the Fort 224. That is the copy of the Tavor X95, so the shorter gun. Now, in theory, there's a 222 and a 223. And by the way, Fort has a wide variety of other designations like this for all sorts of other guns, because they make a ton of stuff outside of just licensed Israeli products. So, is the 222 the TAR-21 in 5.45? I don't know. It is worth noting that what we have here is sort of the DMR version, I believe. We have a slightly longer than normal barrel on this, and we have a Picatinny sight rail that is raised up more than the regular normal Tavor. We do also have the military sights on here, so you won't see these on the American civilian versions of the TAR-21. We have a folding front sight right there. Actually, I think you do see that on some of them, but we also have an interesting folding rear sight in its own lug right here. It's a rear aperture sight, like so. Only that center hole actually goes through. The two holes on the side are blind, so you don't have to try and pick a rear aperture. And then we have this assembly on here as well, which is, it's all plastic. It is a locking clip here and a round mounting post. These are intended for a magnifier for a red dot optic. These are typically issued with Meprolite M5 and or M21 optics. So the DMR version with the extended Picatinny rail, you probably won't be using this, but it's molded into the hardware for the gun anyway, so it's just on there. Worth noting, we have our barrel locking cam here, L and O, locked and open. Those are the same markings as you'd see on all the standard Israeli ones. Same goes for the selector settings. A, R, and S are the standard Israeli markings. The Fort 221 does not appear to be any different in that. I do also have a standard Israeli version that we can do a quick comparison with. I will point out 39 million serial number range compared to the Fort being a 40 million serial number range. This is, to me, this is a distinct possibility that the guns were both manufactured in Israel and either supplied to Ukraine with their own polymer marked pieces or part manufactured in Ukraine, part in Israel. Again, just don't know for sure though. As far as I can see, essentially all of the details here are the same. The selectors are the same, if we put them in the same position. Barrel length is the same. There's a slight difference in muzzle devices, which I'll show you up close in a moment. But all of our detail elements back here, mag release, bolt release, like there just aren't any changes. Here we have the other side. Same thing. The buffer's the same. All the contours on the back of the stock are exactly the same. We do have two slightly different optics setups here. So the Ukrainian one has the rear sight, the backup rear sight, and has the longer, higher Picatinny rail compared to the Israeli one with a lower, shorter rail that actually does not have the rear iron sight. It does have the front, well, plastic sight on it. And there are the muzzle devices, so you can see just a slight change in profile, and that could be from any number of different factors. All right, now my suspicion here is that Fort got the license to manufacture these but never actually tooled up for them, and the guns that Ukraine did get were actually manufactured in Israel. So the reason that I think this is, if we look at our Israeli example here, first off, our serial number is 39.8 million, and then we have this molded in information, IWI, Tavor, etc. Moving over to the Fort, we have a serial number that's essentially in the same range. It's 40.8 million, so yeah, it's a million off, but this isn't the beginning of, doesn't seem to me to be the beginning of a Ukrainian serial number range. Then the Fort 221 marking is a metal plate that is in the same place as this molded polymer. So I think that was cut out and had a metal plate put in with the Ukrainian information. And then our logo here is the exact same polymer stamping, but the Fort logo is actually engraved into the plastic instead of being molded in. And we have basically a milled out little section here where originally on the Israeli guns it says Tavor. So I think this is the exact same piece of polymer as the Israeli production gun. This is not uncommon for licensed production, for the original factory to supply the first batch of guns to help the licensee get set up for production. We're not aware of any large pre-war orders for the Fort 221s, and I suspect Fort was going to tool up when they got their first major order. I suspect they didn't get a major order as such, and thus when the war began, they basically didn't have access to new examples anymore. And so they pulled IMI and Fort off, or IMI and the Tavors off of their own website. They weren't available anymore. That's my suspicion. All right, so that's pretty much everything that I can tell you for sure about these. Now, in the spring of 2021, Fort removed IWI and removed the Tavor series guns from its website, suggesting they're no longer available for export sale. Now, does that mean they're not exporting them because they're not exporting anything, because everything needs to be kept in Ukraine for fighting the Russian invasion? Does it mean that Israel canceled the license? There are plausible reasons that they might have, but maybe they didn't. I just really don't know about that. Are these in active continued production? Were they ever in complete production in Ukraine, or were they, some parts made in Ukraine, some parts imported from Israel? That's the way licensing agreements will often begin, is the first batch of guns are made by the host factory to help the licensee get tooled up and get into production. But again, I don't know. These are really, as far as I can tell, basically exact copies of Israeli production TAR-21s. So maybe that means they just got tooling as part of this licensing deal, and that's why it's identical. Maybe it means some of the parts were made by the Israelis and shipped over. I really don't know. So if you know more about these, and if it's not considered classified information, we don't need this to become the War Thunder forums, but if you know more about these and you'd like to share it, please do consider adding a comment down in the comments, or if you'd like to email me directly, my address is admin@forgottenweapons.com. I'd like to give a big thanks to the French Gendarmerie for giving me access to this particular example to show to you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.